Welcome to the Fire Bay, the podcast where we dive into the heart of the fire service, community engagement, and the stories that keep our world safe. Join Colton every week as he brings you behind the scenes, discuss the issues that matter most to firefighters, share personal stories, and explore ways we can all make a difference in our communities. Whether you're a firefighter, supporter, or just someone who cares about public safety, you're in the right place. This is the Fire Bay.
Welcome back to the Fire Bay. I'm Colton, and today we're going to dive into a topic that every firefighter knows, sometimes dreads, and absolutely depends on. That topic, training. Now, I know some of you listening are probably already rolling your eyes thinking, man, training again, we just did this last shift. But I want to challenge the mindset today, because here's the reality. Training isn't just busy work. It's not just for rookies. Training is a lifeline of this job. It's one thing that makes the difference between success and tragedy. When the tone drops, you're relying on your training. You know, the old saying, you train as you fight and fight as you train. I truly believe that, because when the time comes and your mind is rushing about the different scenarios that you're coming upon when you arrive on scene, it really, if you don't train to the full capacity, when you're frazzled and just worked up, you're going to rely on your training. So if you don't train, you're not going to have that, secondary nature of just doing the task. Over the next half hour, we're going to talk about why training matters, what good training looks like, the pushback we all hear, the different types of training, and how to build a culture where training isn't optional. It's just part of who we are. And along the way, I'll share some personal stories and lessons that hit home for me and my crew. Let's start with the big picture. Why does training matter? The fires we face today are not just fires of our fathers and our fathers before them fought. Homes are packed with synthetic materials that burn hotter and faster. I mean, it's statistics. I saw a thing on Facebook just this week, and our local shared it. 40 years ago, a house had about 17 minutes before it flashed. Now we're down to 3 to 4 minutes. So think about that. You barely have time to pull up, stretch a line, and make entry before conditions become unsurvivable. On top of that, buildings are going up with lighter weight trusses, open floor plans, and all of it contributing to faster collapse times. We simply don't have the luxury of figuring things out on the fly anymore. I'll tell you a quick story. We ran a house fire where conditions changed in seconds. What saved us wasn't luck. It was the fact that we had trained that exact hose stretch dozens of times. When I called for the crew to advance, they didn't think, they just did. And at that point, training is where we mess up, where we take time to correct mistakes so that the real deal hits, muscle memory takes over. And training isn't just for fires. Think about EMS calls, technical rescue, hazmat, active shooter responses. If you're not training, you're gambling. And the stakes are too high for that. In one of the next few podcasts, I have a really good friend, Jason Eubanks. He's a chief out of Nashville Fire Department here in Tennessee. He started a new training program that I really am excited to bring on here. And it's talking about not just the, officer of the engine company or the battalion chief or shift commander or whatever you call them, but it's talking about how that person who rides up as the acting officer that day, or, whatever your role is, how to plan for you to be the incident commander of a fire. And I'm excited to bring him on. But as well as I do, we're always going to have that pushback. We just did it last month, or really, I already know how to do that. Or the classic, this is a waste of time. I probably said them myself at some point in my career, and I know I have. But here's the deal. Training isn't about doing something once and checking it off. It's about repetition. Think about athletes for a second. Tom Brady didn't stop throwing passes after his first Super Bowl. Michael Jordan didn't quit practicing free throws after hitting a game winner. They drilled the basics over and over again. Why? Because when fatigue sets in, when adrenaline is pumping, you fall back on what you practice the most. So next time you're attempting to tune out the training, ask yourself, do I want my crew to hesitate on a mayday? Do I want to be the one fumbling a skill when someone's life is on the line? What are the stakes? Not your pride, not your boredom, lives. Now, let's break down a different kind of training we see in the fire service. Each has its place, and together they make us complete firefighters. First, let's talk about the head on drills. This is the bread and butter. Stretching lines, forcing doors, search and rescue. It's sweaty, it's tiring, and sometimes it's repetitive. But that's where you build the confidence. Taking that rookie or someone that's getting ready to go to the fire academy and put them in a mask and getting them used to the claustrophobic feeling of that mask sucking to their face and have people know what they're getting into. Tabletop scenarios is number two. We do this a lot at my station. We're sitting around the couches or the table or whatever, and we have a easel, a drawing pad, and all three of our shifts, A, B, and C, have done this. I've seen it because I've seen the drawing. But we draw a very terribly drawn house, and we talk about apparatus placement, how to stretch a hose, where to ladder, what's our conditions, how would we attack it? Because another thing too, no matter where you're at, we're going to run things differently than you are most likely because we have low staffing. We're in a rural area of Tennessee. The staffing is very, minimum, and we're going to have people doing the job of 6 people where you might have a person for each one of those tasks. So run through that, know what your SOPs, SOGs are, and really just talk about it. Anytime I have a new person come into the station, I try to sit down and say, okay, hey, this is our game plan today. If we get this call, hopefully this is what's going to happen. If we get this call, this is what I expect of you. And you lay it out that way. That way when the time comes and the stuff hits the fan, everybody's already talked about it. Most of the time too, if you talk about it, you're not going to get it, which is good and bad sometimes. You know, sitting around doing the tabletop scenarios are not always exciting, but it does build the decision making skills, and it lets officers and crews talk about why you have the mindset you do on something. The other day we ran through a scenario and one of my guys disagreed with kind of what I had said about this, and I talked it through with them. And they actually had very good points. And I think as an officer or a senior firefighter or even a rookie, I think you have to hear all sides of something because we're not always right. No matter how much you want to admit it, you're not always right. And people see different things in different angles, and that's okay. That helps build and mold the whole picture of what the scene is. Because unlike some people in politics, our job is not always predictable. So you might respond to a call 100 times and it's the same thing, but that 101 time you might see an asteroid falling from the sky. So moving on, number 3, classroom and online learning. God, I hate this. And I don't know if y'all do this or not, but our department uses an online platform that I feel is just terrible. Not the program itself. I'm sure it's great and it, interfaces with the local um, reporting system and whatnot. But we have, X amount of hours per year that we have to log in because we do fire and EMS, and it just takes forever. But I'm also not a sit at the computer learn type person. I want to be in a classroom or hands on or something, being able to talk to someone about it. So the classroom is more my style of the two. Online learning, I hate. But hey, some people are good for that. It's definitely not glamorous, but critical. You can size up and what you don't understand and bring that back, and you can talk to your officer, your senior, your mentor, whoever it is, a peer, and talk about, be like, hey, we did this online. I just took this class and it just doesn't make sense to me. Can you help explain this to me? So I think one of my favorite ways of training, though, is joint training or mutual aid partner. We did this in the spring. We had Hendersonville Fire, Gallatin Fire, TWRA, Wilson County Sheriff, Corps of Engineers. We had a big mock scenario where we did a victim that had drowned from a local swim area, and we had Hendersonville's dive team and our dive team out there. And Gallatin has a nice fireboat with a platform that we can dive off of. And so we used all these resources and brought them together and said, okay, we have divers, you have a dive boat with a good platform. You know, Hendersonville has divers and a nice boat. TWRA, they're also, obviously the primary investigation for this. So when we're on a scene, what do they expect of us preserving the scene, and what can we do to safely execute the scene? So stuff like that. And I mean, it isn't just like that. A few years ago, we did, structure fire. We burned a few houses for training, and that's all great because, it's all about who you mutual aid with and stuff like that. And working together on these training exercises allows you to see how they lay out their equipment, their tactics, their mindsets, stuff like that. And then, the last one I really want to talk about, let's talk about the leadership and officer development. We don't really talk about this enough. And I told you, I got a buddy of mine that's coming on, going to talk about his program that he's brought out. But officers need training too. And I'm not just talking about the officer 2, officer 3, officer 4 level, at the state fire academy. At least in Tennessee, that's how we do it. I'm talking about, you know, let's do some more hands-on operational style, you know, not just taking the time to set up a visual thing on the board and do it. Let's when you run the local fair or something like that, let's start working on that ICS, implementation. You know, we're seeing more and more natural disasters throughout the country, and it's really important because as officers and as leaders, you need to know how to set up a true ICS system. You need to set up the command presence, talk about communication, because if you're like us, we have 4 departments and we can't talk to each other. Talk about conflict resolution. What happens when someone doesn't agree with you, and how do you handle it? Because again, you're not always right. And then something too, for those that are looking to advance up to even the, director or chief level, um, I think it's a good thing to sit and talk about budgeting and administration and, what, how the county or the city comes up with their budgets on, what makes sense. Why does it cost this much to do this? Because also, when your peers go and watch the local meetings, either the county commission meetings or the city meetings, and they see their leadership saying, okay, we're willing to accept this cut, but we need this. It kind of helps them understand where you're coming from, uh, and knowing that you have two sides of things. Because obviously we know engines and stuff like that cost a lot of money, but so does personnel. We're looking at trying to add, personnel. We personally run 2-man engine companies and even sometimes 2-man stations, and that's wild to me. And you know, it's unsafe, but to get the personnel that we need is quite a bit of money. And so it's something that's not going to be able to be fixed overnight. And it's not even our administration's fault. It's not our elected officials' fault that's in office right now. This is years of not looking towards the future. So all these things, when you get the leadership and the officer development class, and you start talking about all the different things, that different aspects that go into the leadership role, it helps people under you know why you're doing the stuff you're doing. I saw it the other day again on a Facebook post, I'm pretty sure. Um, but it was talking about, one of the worst things that happens is when you have that really knowledgeable senior person. They don't have to be an officer, just that really experienced senior person, but they will not share their knowledge because either A, they don't want you to know what all they know because then they're not as important, or B, they feel like they had to learn it the hard way, so you should learn it the hard way. And I think that kills the culture of fire service because to me, I don't think I want someone coming in knowing a ton less than me. I want them to know as much as they're willing to learn, and I want them to know more than I know because one day I'm not going to be in my position, and I want someone to be able to replace me. And the whole iron sharpens iron deal, we have to set ourselves up. The fire and EMS service, not so much the fire, but the EMS service is really, really dwindling down. You're not seeing the people coming into the field anymore like you did. And so if we don't bring up our next generation of leaders, our departments are going to, you know, basically die with the times because we're going to outage ourselves. So moving on, building a training culture. Training isn't just an activity, it's a culture, and a culture starts with leadership. If the officer shrugs off training, the crew will too. If the officer shows up, straps on gear, and leads by example, suddenly your crew's going to do it too. If they don't, you call them out and they look like a fool. But here's the other piece: senior firefighters, the folks with, you know, 10, 15, 20 years on the job. You're the torchbearers. You've seen things textbooks can't teach. If you checked out during training, your crew will be too. If you lean in, share the stories. You don't have to tell war stories all the time, but demonstrate your way of doing things. You pass down wisdom that keeps traditions alive and it keeps the job safe. I've been lucky to learn under some great senior firefighters who never thought they were above training. And that humility, that attitude sticks with me. And that's the kind of culture that we should all want. So, what can we do? Get out, put on your gear, work out. You know, there's plenty of things you can do, even if you don't have all the famous training equipment. You know, go over medical supplies. If you run, BLS or ALS engines, go over some of the equipment. Go over putting on planning, putting on tourniquets. Pick a cabinet and go over the items in that cabinet for the day. And then when you get done with that, come up with something else. Throw ladders, get chalk from your local store and tape it to the end of the chainsaw and talk about ventilation and put the fan up in the doorways and just there's plenty of things that we can do. And not every day do you have to do something, but every day you need to at least talk about something because you need to make yourself 1% better than you were the day before. And as long as you do that, you're going to have a long, prosperous career. So, to wrap this up, There was a training drill years ago, confined space, maze, blacked out mask, the whole deal. And to be honest, I thought it was pretty dumb. I didn't see the point. A few months later, we were searching a smoke filled structure, and I got a little disoriented. My partner was from a different department, and I didn't really know him that well at the time, but I had to navigate by feel. And what you know, the muscle memory and the pointless quote unquote drill that came back to me was the reason that I stayed calm and I got us out of there. That day, my whole perspective changed on training. So, my challenge to you is this: don't just show up to train, engage in it, push yourself, push your crew. Be the one who raises the bar instead of lowering it. Training isn't optional because the fire doesn't care if you're tired or you're bored or think that you've done it all before. It'll test you either way. And when it does, the only thing standing between you and a disaster is how well you've prepared for it. That's all for the episode of the Fire Bay. That's it for this episode of the Fire Bay. I hope this gave you something to think about and maybe a little motivation to treat your next training session differently. If you found this episode valuable, share it with your crew, your probie, and even your chief. Let's raise the standard together. I'm Colton, and I'll see you next time, right here in the Bay.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you liked what you heard, please like, follow, and share this podcast. Do you have a topic you want us to talk about? Email us at thefirebay@gmail.com